Chapter 1. I stop on the bridge, knowing that this is the last time I will cross it. I look back at the college, the building's surreal architecture bending the light at odd angles as the randomly connected towers loom into the gently cloudy sky. I feel at the sage's pin, reminding myself that it is real, that I graduated. I look down at the large copper circlet, the sigil of my new office, proclaiming me a sage while neatly keeping my new charcoal grey cloak snug and secure. The scales of the serpent were intricately wrought by a master, the eyes of the dragon tiny obsidian flakes. I trace the circular shape of the badge with my finger, finding the point where the dragon begins eating its own tail. A symbol of the cycles. With a heartfelt sigh which releases years of pent-up stress and expectations, letting go of all the fun and wonder, all the bonds made, and knowing that I was leaving this place a better man, I turn away from the old building, thinking to myself, I might as well hit up the market while I am still in the big city. I really doubt there will be anything near as good out in the boonies. I head down the wide, winding road that leads to the heart of Endymion City. The streets buzz with life and death, wagons creak under the weight of goods, shopkeepers shout their wares, beggars slumped against walls and in alleys, and a pack of street urchins dashes by, their laughter echoing off stone walls. The closer I get to the market, the more overwhelming it becomes, compared to the silent study halls I have been used to for the last 4 years. By the time I reach the bazaar, the noise is deafening, and species from all over the kingdom are calling out, interacting, and doing their haggling best. The smell of spices, vendor offerings, and animal filth all commingled into a scent that was so complex and layered, it must have been one step away from sentience. Good gods, I think, remembering my time with the king's auxiliaries. I wonder if I'll ever think back on this smell with fondness. A crier stands on a crate near the edge of the market, shouting about unrest in the north. Deserter bands have been seen across the countryside following the loss at Coggeshall Valley. The king's guardian force is stretched thin. Beware the roads. His words carry over the noise, drawing murmurs from the crowd. I can't help but notice the patched cloaks and sharpened blades of some travellers nearby, their wary stance and tired eyes signs of the trouble they had faced. Deserters. Not that I don't sympathise. I got out as soon as I could, after all. Knowing my graduation was coming up, I had already scouted out the best homesteading supply stalls in the local market. Everything was provided for me at the college, and in the military I only had to requisition the things I needed. Combined life experiences that left me terrible at haggling and with no knowledge of proper pricing. But there were 3 competing stalls, so I figured I could just visit all 3 and then compare them. I used the old go with your gut theory and picked the most interesting-looking merchant to start, that being an old turtleman sporting a large crack in his shell. The crack looked as if it had been patched up with metal that had later been engraved. The turtleman was leaning on a gnarled, sturdy staff. Most importantly, though, he was selling goods off of shelves which had been carved into the side of his cart, which was a gigantic sea monster shell on wheels. A few large lobster creatures, harnessed for travel, clicked and clattered around the side of the cart where they were tied up. The turtleman nods to me as I approach, taking note of my pin right away. Oh, a new sage graces the world. He reaches his old paw out to me. I have discounted prices special for new graduates to make sure you leave with your best foot forward. He gives me a very slow wink. I grin and shake the old snapper's hand. I thank you, honoured elder. I could certainly use the help. I lean in conspiratorially. I'm garbage at handling money. I wink back at him. The old one chuckles, sounding like a bass drum hiccuping, as he pulls me towards his goods, showing off the various tools that someone, me, starting a new life in a small town, might need, as well as those that someone, me, who would be going on a decently long journey to get there, might find handy. All the time, though, he gently guides me onward, always saying that I should view all his stock before making a decision. The old shell has some good stock, and he's a nice guy. I guess I'll just buy from him. Seems like I'm getting a good deal, and I like him. At last the merchant arrived at the most well-lit, best-decorated shelf space. These shelves were carved out with what seemed to be a continuous depiction of a pack of large mountains migrating across a rough ocean. The old shell looked at me with genuine excitement. These young men, I chuckle at the compliment, are the future. With a sweep of his heavy arm, he reveals an eclectic collection of strange-looking gems, each their own colour, size, and cut. They shimmer with an otherworldly light that seems to pulse in time with my heartbeat. The gems, each arranged more or less in categories of small, medium, and large. The smaller gems hum softly, their energy steady but faint, while the larger ones radiate chaotic bursts of colour and movement, as if alive and impatient to be free. I reach my hand out, but the merchant coughs, saying, "Now, before you touch one, you must know that they can sense you right now." I jerk my arm back. He nods and goes on. Making contact in this context is similar to forming a bond. I blink at that. "What are they?" I say with some wonder. The old merchant slips easily into his pitch. "Dungeon cores!" The turtleman's voice rises, rich with pride. Once the treasure of nobles or the spoils of daring adventurers, these marvels have been tamed through breakthroughs in core magics. Now, anyone with enough patience and wit can wield their power. The turtleman gestures at the crystals. Each one of these beauties is able to absorb life energy itself and transform that energy into anything you have fed to it. Craft the perfect item, your favourite tool break, feed it to the core, then, by making the appropriate offering, see it replicated before your eyes. The merchant really hits his stride, losing all sense of old age as he fills with energy and excitement. Within these beautiful little gems lies the soul of a monster. The larger and more complex the gem, the greater the intellect of the soul within, and thus the easier time you will have teaching it. The merchant chuckles. It wouldn't do to put a chicken in charge of your defense strategy, now would it? I laugh. A dungeon core, huh? I think back to the dungeon my unit stumbled across back when I was still in the Orcs. The wounded that came out of there were horrific, many of them dying from strange poisons before I could tend to them. I am no great mage nor a wealthy man. How could I get something powerful enough to be useful to, well, to not kill me? The turtle touches his nose. A wise questions young sage, and the answer lies in the binding process that has made all of this possible at scale. He leans in, waving a scroll in his hand and speaking in a hushed tone. There is a ritual you must perform. A little blood, and the right words, and you will form a pact with the creature that binds it to your will. He looks at me knowingly. Now this will not strip the creature of its mind, but it will compel it to obey your commands. The merchant looks sternly. This is enough for a start, but it will then be up to you to form a relationship with your core. The turtleman looks me in the eyes. A willing core is infinitely more valuable than a slave. I nod, my mind totally lost in a future with me, my pet dungeon, and any food I want on demand at any time. I may have started to drool. The merchant chuckles again. Now, I don't mean to pry, but I do know how much the college gives to its graduates for their travel expenses. I look sheepish. I don't believe that the smaller gems would suffice for someone like you, and the larger ones are out of your reach, but I look up with hope. There was a strange creature who attacked my family as they docked to deliver these cores. The turtle points to a strangely cut, deep azure gem. The angles bizarre, and seem to follow no pattern. Inside the gem is a swirling purple haze, which draws my attention. The light within it seems to probe the edges of its crystalline prison, restless and defiant. They said it had many limbs, and it burst from the ocean, attempting to steal a chest of precious metals that was being loaded onto the great shell. The turtle shrugs. They suggested that the beast was an aberrant, and said that it wasn't terribly difficult to defeat. The gem seems to shudder in outrage. The merchant whispers, "They said it tasted pretty good, too." He winks again, but it was smart enough to nearly get away with it, so I figure it must be better than most of my mid to low range cores. I gulp. How much? The turtleman's eyes gleam with a quiet triumph as he leans back on his staff, his slow grin like the creak of an ancient door. Well, if you take this strange core off my hands, you would be doing me a favour, so... He pretends to think for a moment. 10 gold pieces. I cough. That's everything I have. The merchant smiles. I like you, kid, and I'm aware of your needs, so buy this core from me, and I'll throw in all the basic gear you'll need for the road. What do you say? I tremble as I reach my hand out to the core, unwilling to buy a living being without its consent, without it knowing what is happening. The old merchant watches, knowing I made up my mind. The moment my fingers brush the core, an electric pulse surges through me, not painful but impossibly intense. It crashes into my essence like waves on a rocky shore, each one carrying something raw, hunger, fear, a desperate longing. Then, beneath it all, a spark of something I almost miss. Hope. The connection is visceral, as if this creature is not just aware of me, but pleading for its chance to belong. For a heartbeat, I feel our souls overlap, and it takes my breath away. About an hour later, I walk out of the Turtleman's store, sporting a new backpack, a bedroll, some basic tools for working and cooking, as well as a week's worth of travel rations. The kind old merchant had even left me with 3 copper pieces for good luck. I smile, my new partner packed carefully away, feeling the freedom of my new road and the weight of a task. To go somewhere I am needed, to be of worth to the world. I pull my cloak tighter around me as the city gates loom ahead. The road beyond is unknown, and though the weight of my new role settles heavily on my shoulders, it also feels right. For the first time in years, the path I tread is truly my own. I thought about saving the coins, but there was a really cute little mouseman baker with a tiny little apron selling sticky buns with pecans that were bigger than her, and I declined to keep myself from buying one. I tipped her the last coin I had and wished her well, and damn, one bite in, and the warmth mixed with the caramel crunch. It was one of the best treats I had eaten in a long time. Just before leaving Endymion, I spot an old beggar slumped against the outer wall, his hollow eyes staring at nothing. His legs end in crude stumps, the scars telling of a hasty battlefield amputation. The short hair and bearing of his shoulders, even now, mark him as an old soldier. I crouch beside him, breaking my pastry in half. "Here," I say softly, pressing it into his hand along with a pulse of healing energy. His fingers tremble as he grips the bread, his eyes meeting mine for the first time. "Bless you, Sage," he murmurs, his voice rough with gratitude. I offer a small smile and nod, stepping away as the city gates loom ahead.